Hi there. So today we're going to continue with our second chapter of Hoot. It's been a while. So I'm going to go ahead and reread chapter 2. I think we just read a couple of pages anyway. So now we're going to see a little bit more into Roy and what details does he find out about the running boy. The next morning, Roy traded seats on the school bus to be closer to the front door. When the bus turned onto the street where he had seen the running boy, Roy slipped his backpack over his shoulders and scouted out the window waiting. 7 rows back, Dana Matherson was tormenting a 6th grader named Louis. Louis was from Haiti and Dana was merciless. As the boy came to a stop at the intersection, Roy poked his head out the window and checked up and down the street. Nobody was running. 7 kids boarded the bus, but the strange, shoeless boy was not among them. It was the same story the next day, and the next day after that. By Friday, Roy had pretty much given up. He was sitting 10 rows from the door reading an X-Men comic. As the bus turned the familiar corner and began to slow down, a movement at the corner of his eye made Roy glance up from his comic book. And there he was on the sidewalk, running again. Same basketball jersey, same grimy shorts, same black-soled feet. As the brakes of the school bus wheezed, Roy grabbed his backpack off the floor and stood up. At that instant, 2 big sweaty hands closed around his neck. "Where you going, cowgirl?" "Who is it, guys?" "It's Dana." "Let me go," Roy rasped, squirming to break free. The grip on his throat tightened. He felt Dana's ashtray breath on his right ear. "How come you don't got your boots on today? Who ever heard of a cowgirl wearing Air Jordans?" "They're Reeboks," Roy squeaked. The bus had stopped and the students were starting to board. Roy was furious. He had to get to the door fast, but before the driver closed it and the bus began to roll. But Dana wouldn't let go. The digging his fingers into Roy's windpipe. Roy was having trouble getting air, and struggling only made it worse. "Look at you," Dana chortled from behind, "red as a tomato." Roy knew the rules against fighting on the bus, but he couldn't think of anything else to do. He clenched his his right fist, and brought it up blindly over his shoulder as hard as he could. The punch landed on something moist and rubbery. Who is it? There was a gargled cry. Then Dana's hands fell away from Roy's neck, panting. Roy bolted for the door of the bus just as the last student, a tall girl with curly blonde hair and red framed glasses, came up the steps. Roy clumsily edged past her and jumped to the ground. "Where do you think you're going?" the girl demanded. "Hey, wait!" the bus driver shouted, but Roy was already a blur. The running boy was way ahead of him, but Roy figured he could stay close enough to keep him in sight. He knew the kid couldn't go at full speed forever. He followed him for several blocks, over fences, through shrubbery weaving, through the yapping dogs and lawn sprinklers and hot tubs. Eventually, Roy felt himself tiring. "This kid is amazing," he thought. "Maybe he's practicing for the track team." Once Roy thought he was the boy, he saw the boy glance over his shoulder as if he knew he was being pursued. But Roy couldn't be certain. The boy was still far ahead of him, and Roy was gulping like a beach trout. His shirt was soaked and perspiration poured off his forehead, stinging his eyes. So remember, boys and girls, we're in Florida and it's super hot and humid. Imagine trying to run blocks and blocks and blocks after someone in this type of heat. So Roy's pretty tired right now. The last house in the subdivision was still under construction, but the shoeless boy dashed heedlessly through the lumber and loose nails. 3 men hanging drywall stopped to holler at him, but the boy never broke stride. One of the same workers made a one-armed lunge at Roy, but missed. Suddenly, there was grass under his feet again, and the greenest, softest grass that Roy had ever seen. He realized that he was on a golf course, and that the blonde kid was tearing down the middle of a long, lush fairway. So boys and girls, they're running, and Roy's chasing him. He's coming up to him, and all of a sudden they're in the middle of a golf course. And that's what the word fairway is right there. It's actually the green of a golf course. On one side was a row of tall Australian pines, which are trees, and on the other side was a milky man-made lake. Roy could see 4 brightly dressed figures ahead, gesturing as the barefoot boy as he ran by. Roy gritted his teeth and kept going. He's running. His legs felt like wet cement, and his lungs were on fire. 100 yards ahead, the boy cut sharply to the right and disappeared into the pine trees. Roy doggedly aimed himself for the woods. An angry shout echoed, and Roy noticed that the people in the fairway were waving their arms at him too. He kept right on running. Moments later, there was a distant glint of sunlight on meadow, followed by a muted thwack. Roy didn't actually see the golf ball until it came down 6 feet in front of him. He had no time to duck or dive out of the way. All he could do was turn his head and brace for the blow. So what just happened, boys and girls? Roy just got clocked in the side of the head, or the front of the head, with a golf ball. So if you've ever been hit by a golf ball, it's pretty hard, and it's coming full force at him. The bounce caught him squarely above the left ear, and at first, it didn't even hurt. Then Roy felt himself swaying and spinning as the brilliant gout of fireworks erupted inside his skull. He felt himself falling for what seemed like a long time, falling as softly as a drop of rain on velvet. When the golfers ran up and saw Roy face down in the sand trap, they thought he was dead. Roy heard their frantic cries, but he didn't move. The sugar-white sand felt cool against his burning cheeks, and he was very sleepy. The cowgirl jab, well, that was my own fault, he thought. He told the kids at school he was from Montana, cattle country, when in fact, he'd been born in Detroit, Michigan. Roy's mother and father had moved away from Detroit when he was only a baby, so it seemed silly to call it his hometown. In Roy's mind, he didn't really have a hometown. His family had never stayed anywhere long enough for Roy to feel settled. Of all of the places the Eberhards had lived, Roy's favorite was Bozeman at Montana. The snaggle-peaked mountains, the braided green rivers, the sky so blue it seemed like painting. Roy had never imagined anywhere so beautiful. The Eberhards stayed 2 years, 7 months, and 11 days. Roy wanted to stay forever. On the night his father announced they'd be moving to Florida, Roy locked himself in his bedroom and cried. His mother caught him climbing out the window with his snowboard and a plastic tackle box in which he packed underwear, socks, a fleece ski jacket, and a $100 savings bond his grandfather had given him as a birthday present. His mother assured Roy that he would love Florida. Everybody in America wants to move there, she said. It's so sunny and gorgeous. Then Roy's father had poked his head in the door and said, with somewhat forced enthusiasm, and don't forget Disney World. Disney World is an armpit, Royce had stated flatly. Compared to Montana, I want to stay here. As usual, he was outvoted. So when the homeroom teacher at Trace Middle asked the new kid where he was from, he stood up and said, Bozeman, Montana. It was the same answer he gave on the bus when Dana Matherson accosted him on his first day. And from then on, Roy was Tex, or Cowgirl, or Roy Rogers Hart. It was his own fault for not saying Detroit. "Why did you punch Mr. Matherson?" asked Viola Hennepin. She was the vice principal. So now Roy's in trouble, remember, because he punched Dana on the bus. And it was in her dim office cubicle that Roy now sat awaiting justice. "Because he was choking me to death." "That's not Mr. Matherson's version of events, Mr. Eberhard." Miss Hennepin's face was had extremely pointy features. She was tall and bony and wore a perpetually severe expression. "He says your attacks was unprovoked." "Right," said Roy. "I always pick the biggest, meanest kid on the bus and punch him in the face just for fun." "We don't appreciate sarcasm here at Trace Middle," said Miss Hennepin. "Are you aware that you broke his nose? Don't be surprised if your parents get a hospital bill in the mail." Roy said, "That dumb jerk almost strangled me." "Really? Your bus driver, Mr. Kesey, said he didn't see a thing." "It's possible he was actually watching the road," Roy said. Miss Hennepin smiled thinly. "You got quite the snippy attitude, Mr. Eberhard. What do you think you ought to be done with a violent boy like you?" "Matherson is a menace. He's hassled all the other kids on the bus." "Nobody else has complained." "Well, because they're scared of him," Roy said, which was also why none of the other kids had backed up his story. Nobody wanted to narc on Dana and have to face him the next day on the bus. "If you did nothing wrong, then why'd you run away?" Miss Hennepin asked. Roy noticed a single jet black hair sprouted above her upper lip. He wondered why Miss Hennepin hadn't removed that hair. Was it possible that she was letting it grow? "Mr. Eberhard, I asked you a question." "I ran because I'm scared of him too," Roy replied. Perhaps you were scared of what would happen to you when the incident was reported." "That's totally not true." "Under the rules," said Miss Hennepin, "you could be suspended from school." "He was choking me. What else was I supposed to do?" "Stand up, please." Roy did what he was told. "Step closer," Miss Hennepin said. "How does your head feel? Is this where the golf ball hit you?" She touched the tender purple lump above his ear. "Yes, ma'am." "You're a lucky young man. It could have been worse." He felt Miss Hennepin's bony fingers turn down the collar of his shirt. Her chilly gray eyes narrowed and her waxy lips pursed in consternation. So she's looking him over like this with her pointy face. She said, peering like a buzzard. "What is it?" Roy backed out of her reach. The principal cleared her throat and said, "That knot in your head tells me you've learned the lesson the hard way. Am I right?" Roy nodded. There was no use trying to reason with a person who was cultivating one long, oily hair on her lip. Miss Hennepin gave Roy the creeps. "Therefore, I've decided not to suspend you from school," she said, tapping a pencil on her chin. "I am, however, going to suspend you from the bus." "Really?" Roy almost burst out laughing. What a fantastic punishment. "No bus ride? No Dana." "For 2 weeks, Miss Hennepin said. Roy tried to look bummed. 2 whole weeks. In addition, here we go, guys. I want you to write a letter of apology to Mr. Matherson. A sincere letter." Okay, said Roy. "But who's going to help him read it?" Miss Hennepin clicked her pointy teeth. "Don't press your luck, Mr. Eberhard." "No, ma'am." As soon as he left the office, Roy hurried to the boys' bathroom. He climbed up on one of the sinks that had a mirror and pulled down his shirt collar to see what Miss Hennepin had been staring at. So she's looking at his temple, and all of a sudden she starts to look here. What happened on his neck, boys and girls? Listen. Roy grinned. Plainly visible on each side of his Adam's apple were 4 finger-sized bruises. He swiveled around on the rim of the sink and, craning over his shoulder, spotted 2 matching thumb marks on the nape, or on the back of his neck. "Thank you, dumb butt Dana," he thought. "Now Miss Hennepin knows I'm telling the truth. Well, most of the truth." Roy had left out the part about the strange running boy. He wasn't sure why, but it seemed like the sort of thing you didn't tell a vice principal unless you absolutely had to. And boys and girls, we're going to stop there. So as we learn, Dana is now in trouble. Well, Roy is too. And what is his big punishment? He doesn't have to take the bus. Does Roy really even want to take the bus right now? No. And so, did he get closer to finding who this running boy was right now? No. But stay tuned, boys and girls, for the next part of chapter 2.